Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Send your questions and comments to DJ at ArtistFirst.com and we'll read them on the air. Here they are, your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, Z-Man. And yes, it's Margaret and Michael Lyons.
Here we are.
Here we are. We have to change that up once in a while. We have to do ladies first every other show for stop. Well, why not? And because that's the truth, and that's what the subject of this show is tonight. We are going to talk about the truth, and everybody has one.
Indeed.
And can you handle it?
Yes. Can you handle it?
Can you handle it? And in fact, it is a true statement that there are a lot of things which are true, and true things, two completely true things, can be in violent and diametric conflict with each other and still be both perfectly true. So in some ways, everybody does have their own truth.
Right. If you begin to look at it from multiple perspectives that way, yes.
Well, I think that's part of the that is part of the truth, is that it is in some ways dependent on your perspective.
No, I agree. There is an overall truth, and most people get glimpses of that. But when it comes to your own personal understanding of things, you acknowledge the fact that everyone just doesn't see things the way you do. Or it would be best if you could acknowledge that not everyone sees things the way you do. You might have a common or a commonality in your perspectives, but for everything to meet up on every single point is usually few and far between.
Right, and then you have things like, the ground truth, or let's say scientific truth, a fact.
Fact.
And I was reading something, it was actually earlier this week, and the title was "The Facts versus the Truth." They don't always agree. and in truth, in fact and in truth, the difference between truth and the facts is you can't argue about the facts.
Right.
But you can argue about the truth.
Isn't that interesting? That is fascinating. Actually, that is quite fascinating.
It is, and I think people get both those words conflated and confused in lots of different ways. There is certainly objective fact. You can test it, you can measure it, you can weigh it. That's the objective facts. Those are the observed phenomena. But truth is something that has to be digested, and it has to be realized, and it has to be agreed upon. Facts don't care.
Right. Right. It is a reproducible something. It's not just a one-time occurrence. It happens repeatedly. And that was the foundation of what people were putting together and calling scientific laws. What is that?
Well,
it was reproducible.
Right, or the true scientific method, which is, again, people get very confused, but it really comes down to, stating a hypothesis or stating your idea of what you think is the truth. And the operative word there is think is the truth. Mm-hmm. So you say, I think all cars are green on the underside. And then you test a few, and you say, wow, every car I tested is green underneath. And so therefore, you extrapolate and say, all cars are green underneath. Now, if no other cars exist in the universe, you've got a truth and a fact.
True.
However, you can take, and this is a silly example, but you can take those facts that every car you've tested is green underneath and extrapolate to something you call a truth or a law and be completely and totally wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the difference between, from facts, you try to get to truths, and oftentimes people will use facts or find a few agreeable facts.
Right.
You know, cherry pick your facts.
Well,
and then, go ahead.
Yeah, no, they start weaving their reality at that point. You know, my reality is based on this that I think should be happening, like the underside of cars are green,
Mm-hmm.
and this that, you know, every car must be. You know, just suddenly now it's interesting because then you have that element of control in there. It's like, I have a way to control my reality.
Well, we should unpack that a little bit more, because really what it is when you say I have these facts, and therefore I'm going to state a truth, which is a universal truth, which is true for all things. What you're really doing is defining how small your universe is, more than how universal your truth is.
Correct.
And so that's the kind of the inside out of a truth. Facts are stubborn things. Facts are just out there, sitting on the table, fat, dumb, and happy, and they're like, wow, I'm a fact. You can't get rid of me. You can't deny me. I'm a thing. You know, that happened. But truths are fungible, and they evolve, and they can be disagreed with, and they can be modified. You know, and there are, as you say, there are some things that as far as we know, and let's give it the perspective of all humanity, as far as we know, these things are truths, and there are some absolute truths that we kind of have tried to define and agree upon. But there's a very broad spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about mathematical, you know, axioms and proofs, those terms are sort of like the facts, or in some cases with an axiom, what you assume to be true, a ground truth, you know, one of those things that doesn't move around much, like, you know, 0 means nothing at all. That's a good ground truth. And 1 means 1. You know, you got 2 ground truths here, and then you start to say, well, okay, from that, what can we prove? And the proof is the thought process. It's the deductive process. It's the, let's take these 2 things that we think are absolutely true and see what we can do with them. Maybe get a third thing that we think is absolutely true and see if we can prove or disprove it. And so you have had a tremendous amount of training in math and in the higher mathematics, and I've had, you know, a passing smattering of it myself. But those types of dialectical or logical thought based on ground facts, you can arrive at what are universal truths. Mathematical truths appear to be universal. They've survived many, many tests without things seeming to disprove them.
Right. Well, it's just the language is very straightforward. You know, when you agree that a certain symbol is going to equal a concept of quantity or a lack of quantity. I mean, honestly, when you think of 0 is equal to nothing, it's like, well, what's the concept of nothing? Except when you bring it into this sort of arena where it's just a matter of counting a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So just even that construct of beginning to set the vocabulary down of what a number actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's, you know, we teach our children when they're young their numbers and their letters, and, you know, you extend that out to language. My goodness. And language, your letters form words, and then words mean either things or actions. It goes.
But words is a great one, because words are something which, again, are often used to construct truths, or one person's idea, or rather one person's definition of what a word means, is oftentimes places where miscommunication begins, where truths start to separate, where one person's concept of a word underlies their concept of a truth, and then you turn that around. It's sort of like what the meaning of is, just to pick one out of a hat.
Oh my!
Yeah. But that's why we all hate lawyers. And we haven't had a good lawyer joke in a while, but we do all hate lawyers, because lawyers take words and twist them to mean any darn thing they want them to. But and in fact, that's the problem with truths, because as truths get farther away from facts, and truths tend to kind of walk like very fast and loose sometimes. You've heard of the expression, he's playing fast and loose with the truth, because the words and the facts start to diverge. They start to get farther and farther and farther apart, and all of a sudden you're now arguing over the meaning of basic concepts, because
Right.
you've managed to kind of fuzz them up and make them, the old fuzzy math versus the hard math. The fuzzy math, the fuzziness of that is sometimes a way of dealing with certain systems which are very fuzzy, but it's also a way of kind of getting away from the hard facts, or away from observed phenomena and things that you can actually prove and disprove.
Well, the main difference usually with math and language is that with math, there's usually not a like or a dislike involved. With language, there's always an opinion of whether you like it or not.
Right.
And which is why the mathematics, I think, functions more streamlined, because it is literally just descriptions of things going on, as opposed to whether or not something is happening, and does it have, is it something that you're actually having a reaction to? Because people have reactions to so many things. Is it an emotional thing? Are you being triggered so that suddenly you're thinking of something else that happened? Memories, whatnot. Human is very, very complex. But just going back, let's go back to the beginning. I think we've gone afield again.
No. So back to the beginning. Truth. We'll go back to the truth, which nobody can handle.
Well, it's interesting because most people don't look at another person, and in conversation, are you really communicating that thought or concept or emotion that you really want to communicate? Is this other person actually open to be able to receive what you are trying to convey fully in your particular way? Are they willing to even begin to take steps in looking at it through your viewpoint? Or is it a concept that's presented and is only looked at from that person's viewpoint from the outside? Because you can both look at, like, for instance, you're looking at the globe, and someone's looking at North America and someone else is looking at China. But you're both looking at the globe. It's a different perspective, just opposite sides. Are you both willing to discuss the globe itself, because that is the concept? Or is it only this particular hemisphere or side that you happen to be looking at? Is that what you are talking about? And that's what I find fascinating. Most people aren't willing to expand their concept or maybe be open enough to receive the concept that the other person is trying to communicate fully as the globe.
Mm-hmm.
And then taking it a step further, they'll go into the world, because that represents the world to them. So there you start spinning off into whole bunches of other concepts of what their own personal world happens to be, and their own personal concept of what is true and what is not.
Exactly. I mean, the concept, the great way of explaining this is, I believe, a Native American way, which is we all dream our own dream, and the world is our, where we dream the common dream. Everyone is an individual, all individuals. Everyone perceives everything from their own point of view. So once you say that, you say, well, how do we interact with each other? We have to be open enough to be able to say, well, this person sees it from this point of view, and I see it from this point of view. And to the extent that those 2 points of view overlap, we start to have a communication. We start to have a conversation. We have things that we can now agree upon, things that we can disagree upon, and things that we can negotiate and come to an understanding. But if you really look at it, really look at it, is no person, no one individual perception is the same as any others. So your individual perception of this room that we're in right now is completely opposite to mine. Yet we can agree on many, many things. We can agree on what the floor is made of, what the ceiling is made of, et cetera, et cetera. But, it's that, remember the Brain Games show? And they were talking about perception and color and all the other things, and how incredibly interesting it was that when you look at a color and I look at a color, we both call it green, but do we really see the same thing? And to some extent we do, and to some extent we can't. Mm-hmm. Your perception, and that's a simple, that the wall has a color is a fact. That I call it green is my truth. That you call it green is your truth. That we then say, well, we both think it's green is our common interpretation of that color. But will we ever know whether truly what you perceive, what your actual perception of that color is, actually agrees with my actual perception of the color is? And that's the divide in which facts and truth are always separated.
Mm-hmm.
The truth of the matter is that neither one of us knows how the other perceives the fact, the reality of the thing. And we all know that if we close our eyes and walk at it, we're going to whack into it. And, right? And we also know that the physical realities, we agree upon it. If I walk 10 feet in this direction, I'm going to whack into a tree, and if you start in the same spot and you walk those 10 feet, you'll whack into a tree. So there's something there. It's physical, it's hard, it's going to hurt us if we walk into it. But whether or not, when I look at the tree, what I see, all the things, and there are many, 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 many things which are facts about that tree, agree with what you see about that tree. And seeing is just one sense. All the senses, each one of them have their own set of facts, which we then meld together in our, however many ounces of fatty tissue up there that melds all these things together into what we conveniently call reality. And from that mishmash, we end up with ideas that we try to communicate with the same mishmash. And does anyone wonder that we have problems in the world? I've got my own facts. Thank you very much. What was that shirt that they wore on Mythbusters all the time?
Oh, I reject your reality and
I substitute my
own.
That, by the way, is exactly why wars start. I reject your reality and I substitute my own.
Yes. Yes. That's why it takes so much to be able to negotiate between two people.
Right.
Especially if there's an argument about something.
Right.
Or, I mean, the first step usually is to realize that, okay, there's something amiss here. You're not seeing it the way I'm seeing it, and I'm not seeing it the way you're seeing it, so we need to talk. And talking seems to be the only way that we can communicate to one another, which I think is funny. Because we certainly know that in and of itself can be a faulty way of conveying a certain feeling or thought. I mean, words are little packets of info for people, and everyone has a range when it comes to a definition of a word.
Right, and then, to make it even worse, it's a wonder if anything ever gets communicated, because to make it even worse, the words that you hear are not necessarily the words that the other person said. And, to give you we're all familiar with what I heard you say was, and then you repeat back what you think you heard them say, and they say, no. Because when you hear somebody else say back to you the words that you just said, you go, that's not what I meant. What I meant was, when I said the wall is green, what I meant was, you're an idiot.
Oh, my.
Okay, so you're hearing the wall is green, and I'm saying you are a fool of first-class proportions. So we got a little truth deconstruction going on here.
Oh God.
So,
okay.
But in fact, that's the truth. Even that's what happens when people misunderstand each other. Even over the simplest of things, you have to define your terms, state your concept clearly. It's not scientific method anymore, but now we're just trying to communicate. So we want to define our terms. What language are we speaking? What do the terms mean? Is this a formal or an informal type of communication? But so we have these kind of rituals and these kind of rote things that help us to make these communications. Almost always when people are making commitments to each other, it's done in sort of a formalized, ritualized way, because that's way we know that we are communicating. What is a handshake? A handshake is I agree, and it's become this sort of universal okay, It can be a greeting, it can be many other things, but when you're talking to each other and you're saying, okay, now we understand, give me your hand, or that's the deal, give me your hand, and that contact signifies that we have reached agreement. Now, in fact, what I think I'm agreeing to and what you think I'm agreeing to, and vice versa, may not actually jive up. And, that's why we have a divorce rate in this country, people. Or that's why people have disputes over contracts and agreements. But in fact, we try to use these sort of formulaic or ritualistic methods or symbols, signals, if you will, to say that we have reached an agreement, or we have
byplay. Yeah, it's the byplay. I always found it fascinating watching the animals in their byplay, because they're not using words. And they go through their form of relationship, whether it's like courtship rituals that they do. And, the female, like, for instance, those funny little the guinea fowl.
Guinea fowl, yes.
The guinea fowl. The male does this funny little dance with its feet.
Right. You see that in pretty much any disco in New York.
Okay.
Same thing. Yep. Big golden chain. Yeah, it's terrible. Sorry, go right ahead.
Well, but just this is their form of communication. Or some of those birds of paradise, when they're courting the female, and they do all these strange little movements with their wings, and they puff up their feathers, and they make these strange shapes around her to show that, I can do this, I can build this, the bowerbirds, it goes on
Right.
and on that way, and you're watching this, realizing that, that communication is happening.
And that's actually a great point, because basic communication is closer to truth than more complex communication. When you're talking about a courtship ritual, whether it's in animals or people, there are certain basic things that you can find in cultures and you can find in various species, and these things mean something. When you have these types of basic and let's call them communications that matter for survival. So survival communications, the communications between an infant and its mother, the communications between children and their parents, which everyone knows how easy communications are with your children, because that's survival. Wait a minute, maybe that's not true, but those types of things have been worked out not over just millennia, but over the whole life of a species, the whole life of humanity, and they've become so ingrained in how you communicate that they are nearly truths. They have to happen. These things have to happen for the species to continue. These things have to happen for nutrition to be given to the children, et cetera, et cetera. So those types of basic facts, I need to eat, I need to procreate, I need to defend myself, those types of basic facts have developed very basic language, or very basic ways of expressing them, and very basic ways of acknowledging those truths on top of them, because they're so important. It's when we get further and further away, kind of the higher constructs, that like radio shows, where you really get way out, way out there, and you have no idea what you're talking about.
I see.
And in fact, since we don't have any idea what we're talking about, what we're going to do is take a little studio break, go back and let other people talk to you who will try to sell you things, which are, I'm sure, true. And then we'll come back after that and talk more about truth.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indy Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Taking God on Patrol is a first-person account of the world of law enforcement from the perspective of a Christian police officer in the 4th largest city in America. From speeding car chases to the crossing of the thin blue line, author Mark S. Cariner seeks to find God's biblical truth in a behind-the-scenes look at law enforcement. And check out Mark's newest book, The Tactical Heart. Both are available at Amazon.com.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
You are listening to The Soul of the Everyman on Artist First World Radio. All past shows are archived. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. Now back to your hosts, Margaret and Michael Lines.
There we go.
And thank you very much, Z-Man.
Thank you very much, Z-Man. And that is the truth of it all, folks. And tonight, thank you very much for joining us on the second half of the Soul of the Everyman show. We are talking about truth. And we spent the first half hour talking about sort of, how truth can become sort of widely, or if not widely separated, at least pretty far separated from facts. Facts are stubborn things. Truth, on the other hand, is how you see it. And we touched upon. I want to go back and talk a little bit about, when people interact, the basic interactions that we first all start up with is family interactions. And if you want to see how truth can be twisted from facts, talk to any 2-year-old.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Because 2-year-olds will twist the truth into exactly what they want it to be.
Mm-hmm. And therein lies the truth. When the little one, the 2-year-old, decides that this is what I want to do.
Right. And how can I do it? Regardless of what I was told.
Well, the interesting part about that, how can I do it, is that means that he's had some interaction saying you're not supposed to do that. Right. So now figuring comes in. Right.
And I think that level of figuring starts, maybe even earlier than 2, where your individual perception of reality is colored by what you want to do. There's your needs and your wants, right? Mm-hmm. And your wants are what you will bend your truth around. Mm-hmm. Okay, again, needs are like facts. Needs are things you need, like shelter and food and so on. But wants are slippery little beggars. They're like, man, if we wrap the truth around this, we can do whatever we want to do. So when somebody says, if you want to have a cookie, you have to do X, Y, and Z, and then you take the cookie and say, well, I thought you said I could take the cookie and then do X, Y, or Z. I'm sorry, but the cookie was delicious. The facts of that are the cookie has been eaten. So wants are how people end up bending truths. And in conversation, it oftentimes why people don't hear what you're saying is they don't want to hear what you're saying. They want to hear something else.
Yes. And it's interesting. I'd love to see the brain scans and what's firing up in that brain of theirs, that head, when they're in conversation and they're looking for something. They're looking for something quite specific that they really want. It's like, what part of your brain is lighting up now?
And it'll be reflected in the physical, certainly, but it's when your wants conflict with the facts and the truth, if you will. When your wants conflict with the facts and the truth, people are as a species and individually, we are all very willing to bend the facts and the truth to meet what we want them to be, our fantasy about what we think we want. You can see it all the time when people, I'm not going to pick on genders, but when somebody wants someone else to love them, they will very often bend what are not necessarily good actions into what they want them to be. I want this person to love me so much that when they treat me badly and do all these terrible things to me, that's how they're trying to love me. These are the kind of things that you can.
It's a sign of affection.
Whatever it's how people disillusion themselves. It's how they build a false reality. But from the perspective of the person, again, who is living in that false reality, who can't handle the truth, this is their truth. This is their reality, and you will never get a worse reaction from anyone than when you pop that bubble, or you break through that echo chamber, or you get inside that little constructed reality, and you go, guess what? Peekaboo! This is reality, real reality peeking in. They're going to be like, taking out every weapon and blaming you for any kind of problem because you broke their precious construction.
Right. It's usually the emotion. That's the interesting part, is if you pop that bubble, the emotional backlash is the first thing that's going to meet you, because there's a lot of anger and fear rolled up together first to destroy you from because you have popped that reality bubble.
Right.
And I think I said this before, but it's usually because that reality bubble is based in self-identity. Whenever you wind up having a person, they interpret what is being said as an attack on themselves and their identity.
Yes.
That's when that survival reaction kicks in, and they just go for the throat. They won't even recall what was going on. All they knew is that suddenly they're swept up in this overwhelming reaction to either kill you or run.
Right. Because what you've done to them is they're selling down that Egyptian river, denial. And when you are on the Nile, when you're in denial, when you have constructed your own reality, whatever it is, I'll pick a personal example. When Christopher got sick, the very first reaction I had was that I wanted to deny that he was sick. I wanted to fantasize that somehow it was all a big mistake,
right.
And for whatever the reasons are, whether they're the best of reasons or you're being very self-serving, when you have constructed a false reality, you imbue it, you give it life with your emotion. You give it life with your hopes rather than facts. Facts are cold, hard little bastards.
Yes,
Hopes and emotions are warm and buzzy, and you can push them you can mold them in any direction you want. But when the facts pop your emotion bubble, you get this gigantic hurricane of released emotion. And it can be anything. In the case when you finally realize that yes, your child really does have a disease and you really are going to have to deal with it. It can be grief and sadness and loss, and you have to come to grips with a real new reality, one that's going to be very, very different from what you thought. And when reality intrudes, when your carefully constructed little world falls apart, it can be devastating.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And the training of the mind to be able just to see what is actually going on, and then focusing in on hope. I mean, that's second nature to man.
Yeah.
Truth. I would never take that away from someone. The ability to hope for the better. And you can't allow your spirit, because hope comes from your spirit. Your head will not give you hope.
No. Most people's heads are hopeless. Completely hopeless.
Oh, Lordy. Yes. But their heart and their spirit, you realize that that you want something, there's something more going on here. Yes, the facts, which are cold and hard,
they are
still in front of you, but you realize that you are in a moment where you must make a decision on your next step and where your path has got to go, especially if it's for your child. You got to really just flush any idea of your own prejudices, like what you would like to happen and what you would, and just you have to operate on that knife's edge of, you have your scientific fact and you've got to make decisions, and you also understand that the hope that is in your spirit and in your child's spirit must be fed all the way through that. So you want a tightrope to walk. That's one. And that's not just a tightrope, it's a razor's edge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we used to say that all the time when we were going through Chris's illness. We feel as if we're right on the pressure wave, right before the knife cuts. And that was reality for us.
And that's, that right there, the wave right before the pressure wave of the knife edge, is an absolute cold, hard fact. But the thing that makes it livable is that you have two choices on the pressure wave, hope or despair.
Right.
And the human heart, this is the proper operation of, you aren't building a false reality. What you do is you accept what reality is. You accept exactly where you are. If you want to see the right, not the right way, but the healthy way to do this is, yes, all those facts. The reality is you are right here on the pressure edge of the knife. And by the way, we all are. It's not just people in hospital, people with sick children. We're all right there on the pressure edge of the knife. And each passing moment, you have your choices. And your choices are to live in the hope of a good thing coming, or extrapolate and say, no matter what happens, it'll always be bad. And the human heart, the proper exercise of the human heart is to say, I'll live with the hope. I'll accept the reality, but the unknown, the hoped-for unknown, has to be hoped for with the positive attitude. Mm-hmm. And then we're talking about manifestation. Mm-hmm. And there are three things about reality. The past is immutable. The present is happening all the time, like now. And the future is unknowable. You can't do anything about the past. Don't let it make you despair.
Yeah, don't let it eat you.
Live in the present moment. Be on the pressure wave and hope for the future, because the future is unknowable, and despair gets you nowhere. Despair is that self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you want truth, the truth is you can't change the past. That's truth. You have to live in the present. That's reality. And you must choose to not live in a false future. Try to live in a true future. Now, there's no way to live in a true future because you don't know what the future is going to be. But you have to live in a future, or hope for a future, that is true in your heart. Use your heart. Your heart is a truth magnet. It's also a lie magnet.
Well, it can discern.
It can discern.
It doesn't attract lies to you.
No. I'm sorry. I said it wrong. It's a lie detector is what I meant. The heart will tell you when something's true, and it'll tell you when something's false. The head, like you said, will lie to you. If you want a false reality, the head's your man.
Yeah. Now, as long as you're listening to the head, it'll tell you anything you want to hear.
Yes, your wants and the warpage of truth will come from that head.
And I think really that brings up the fact that what is truly important is what you put your attention to. Because what you put your attention to actually feeds that part. So if you put your attention to your heart, you are actually feeding the heart, and that enables you to be able to walk on that razor's edge. Because
and see true.
Right. And you see farther, and understand that the strength that you are feeling in that moment is not your human part. It's your spirit part, your divine part, that spark from the divine. Courage comes from there. Fortitude comes from there. Hope comes from there. And this is what you choose. If you choose otherwise, if you choose to be taken down by the events that are going on around you, they're telling you that your child only has less than 10% chance of living through, of recovering, which means for them, statistically, mind you, 90% means that he's not going to. Okay? And Razor's Edge understands that you are not slated one way or the other.
Right.
The way you walk, I guess that way of communicating to another person, that 90%, is an incorrect way of understanding what it means to live. Because really those statistics don't really mean anything. Those statistics are what is needed for the doctors and the staff to get the acknowledgement from the parent that you understand how serious this is. That's really what all that statistic is.
Right.
Okay? There's no guarantee. There never is. But there is no guarantee that you are going to be in that 90% or the 10. All right? They're just telling you. But in a lot of the parents' minds, they're like, well, this has got to be a solid fact then.
Right. That's exactly it. What is the statistic is the past. It's something that happened before. And you're right, people take it as fact. And that's one of the ways that a past event gets turned into a future fact. There are no future facts.
Mm-hmm.
And once your heart knows that all the time, your heart always knows that the future doesn't have facts.
Mm-hmm.
That when and this is a great example too. When a doctor says to you, "Oh, you have the XYZ thing," but 90% of the people who get that are just fine. What do people hear? That what they hear is, "I'll be just fine. The doctor said I would be." Because the fact is, well, we've seen many things like this in the past, and this is what we figured out, that this is what this means in the past. The bending of reality is, oh, you're telling me that I don't have to worry, that you've got it, it's all taken care of and everything's fine, and then you abrogate your actual using your heart to figure out where you want what you want to do and where you want to go, because you've given over that whole choosing and living in the present and looking toward the future to some other fact, some dead statistic in the past. Oh.
Right.
And it works both ways. If you say to the person who is not listening to their heart, oh, 90% of the people who have this die in a week. And you can say to yourself, I'm dead. I'm a dead man. I'm dead in a week. The heart says, live anyway. Anybody can be dead in a week. Anybody can be dead in the next second, because the future is unknowable. It's a false reality to say, well, I got out of my bed this morning, I walked downstairs, and I know that the rest of my life for the next 87 and a half years is going to be just great. No. You're here right now, live. You don't know what the future brings. That requires courage. Statistics don't require any courage. They're like, I control the reality. Everyone tells me I'm going to be fine. Everything's great. I don't need any courage. I'm all fine. Nope. And then if you train yourself to listen to your heart, when it happens, and it will happen to almost everyone, that you face a real challenge, or that reality really comes up and puts you right on the edge of the pressure wave, you'll have your heart right there with you and saying, yep, we've always been here. It's cool. We'll figure it out. We know that we can see the truth, our truth, whatever the truth is, instead of us being blinded by all this nonsense of you'll be fine, you'll be fine, you'll be fine. Oh my gosh, you'll be dead in a week. You know?
Well, it's again, what is it that you really, in your heart? I mean, most people they're looking. Well, I just want to live my life. Now, how many times have we heard that?
Oh my God, yes.
And what that carries with it when they say it. It's like, oh, I just want to live my life. Well, it means usually I just don't want to have any problems, is what that means.
I want whatever I want, and I don't want anything to intrude on my wants.
Right. And you sit there and you go, I don't know of any one person whose life is so perfect that way. Not one person. So where did this bit of reality come from?
Well, or a bit of fantasy.
Well, okay, now you are defining fantasy and reality. But this is my point. This is where most people are like, well, everything else in the world doesn't matter. I'm okay. I'm just fine. And the heck with everybody else, kind of. That's the attitude that happens. It doesn't mean that you have to interfere with everybody else's life. Okay, let's get that straight. It just means that you do care of what it means to truly be human. You understand that the emotions that you're feeling, though they are your unique viewpoint, are common throughout humanity. Sorrow and joy, pain, suffering, and putting a hand into creation. The joy of that. I mean, that's human. The animals cannot do this. So when you look at that piece, I think we said this before, where you see the communications going on. There is communication on just a physical body level. Okay, but you're more than just that. So much more. And you get to choose where you reside. And that choice, for the sake of peace, needs to come from a clear heart level. Mm-hmm. Clear heart level. Acknowledging that you have all these emotions, whether they are good or bad, is moot. These are your emotions. That is the reality. That is the truth. These are the emotions that you are feeling. And the classification of good or bad is where the head wants to come in and supervise your heart on what it's actually going through. And don't fall into that, because that supervision means, to your consciousness, you're like, well, I really don't like this feeling that I'm feeling right now. And then the head comes in, well, let's classify it as this, and then we can shove that into the corner and not see it. Denial that it exists, and then, and it starts speaking in that way to try to govern your heart, and you're like, you don't understand. Everything that I am flows from the core of my being, which comes through my heart. So even though that seems like a nice little idea, I'm not going to fall into a state where all I do is push away everything that I don't like. Because life is not here to make you feel happy, happy, joy, joy all the time.
Right. And as we said before, if you listen to the head and you steal pieces of the heart's energy to build up a false reality, And then, all that emotion, all that tension, all that kind of false, all that kind of false perception that's built up. These are the things I don't like and I don't talk about. When reality comes in, your heart will be so weakened by having to have powered this false reality. And when it's broken, this is when you see people fall into despair. The true reality requires courage. The true reality is we are not guaranteed your next heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
So live.
Mm-hmm.
The old saying is, plan as though you're going to live forever, and live as though you're going to die tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
The first part is I could care less, planning, but the second part is incredibly important. Is if you live each day, and you want a good example, look at your average 2-year-old. If you live each day like it's going to be your last, not that you have to be reckless and crazy, but you have to understand that you have to get your heart involved. Your heart lives in the present. Your heart understands what it is to live in courage and into the unknown future.
The 2-year-old doesn't think in the future.
Never.
Okay, and the past is only relevant if it means that there's a cookie involved. Okay, there's something that's repeatable.
Like knowing where it is.
Yes, yes. But that's my point. They're not concerned about past or future. It's right now, and what can I do, or where can I be, or can I just be right here and experiencing this? That's all there is.
The other thing, which is when you put a 2-year-old in the sand with a shovel and a bucket, they are in the absolute present and not worrying about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow. We are living right now. And the lovely part about that is when you put adults into the sand with a bucket, that's where you're listening to your heart. When you're not worrying and you're not thinking about all the things that you have to do, and you're not saying the past was this and the future's that.
No schedules.
No schedules, but also no head voice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And actually, it's very funny because when you are actually in that moment and you are participating with the kids, just watching their reactions. I mean, suddenly the joy is sharing whatever the experience is. And I do remember one of them, when they were little, just could not stand the sand. Having sand stuck to their feet was like a big, oh no, this is horrific. Just like, no. And then just sitting there looking at, what is this stuff stuck?
Well, and the stuff that is stuck to the bottom of your feet can be truth.
Are you walking in it? Yes.
Are you people? You have to avoid the truth, and then pick it up and put it up in the poop bag. Anyway, and we've come to the end of a truthful episode of The Soul of the Everyman. And I'm Michael Lyons, and
I'm Margaret, and thank you for listening.